We all should be very grateful for all the behind the scenes work Jenny does to make all of these wonderful webinars and other events happen. And I'm really grateful for her. Thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. We are excited to have Bonnie Jean Feldkamp and Bob Hill with us tonight to talk about Bob's new memoir, Out Here. And before we get to that, I'd just like to quickly mention the NSNC contest that was just opened. It's going to run through April 15th, and everyone is welcome to submit. You don't have to be a member, although you will save on entry fees by becoming an NSNC member. I felt like I needed to say that quickly, like they do in commercials. You will save money. We really hope to have you join us. Joanne Brokaw, who's our new contest director, has done so many great things, and I know that you're going to benefit from them. Now on to the main event. As we mentioned in the information about the event, Bob Hill and Bonnie Jean Feldkamp have a few things in common. Both have written columns for the Louisville Courier Journal, or Louisville, as my cousins who live there say. Both love gardening, and both are big fans of the National Society of Newspaper Columnists, and we love them. I am so pleased to introduce them. Bonnie Jean Feldkamp writes an award-winning syndicated column distributed to newspapers across the U.S. She is the former community engagement and opinion editor for the Pulitzer Prize-winning Louisville Courier Journal, which is part of the USA Today network. She's also the former media director for the National Society of Newspaper Columnists. Regarding Bob and his 33 years there at the Courier Journal, he has written 14 books and more than 4,000 columns. My brain just exploded a little bit. Using humor and whimsy, truth, passion, and a sense of place to portray the lives and deaths and triumphs and losses of communities and their people. He's written books on various subjects, many of which I still need to read, apparently, such as gardening, the history of the Louisville Slugger bat, a history of basketball, and a true crime book. I also did a small bit of sleuthing, unless my research is incorrect, and found out that he won. I'm going to go way back here for just a minute, Bob. He won 10 varsity letters in 4 sports in high school, but football, basketball, baseball, and track, which I didn't know, and then played basketball at Rice University. So I want to just say welcome again to Bonnie and Bob. We're so grateful to have you here, and thank you for spending your time with us.
Thank you.
Well,
That's a great introduction. We should just take you around with us everywhere. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Welcome. Bob and I have gotten the chance to get to know each other over the last few years here in Louisville. And another thing that we have in common that I think is interesting is neither one of us have a journalism degree. Both of us came to column writing via the side road, so to speak. And so my first question for you, Bob, which I really like, here's the cover of the book in case anybody hasn't seen it, is that when you first started writing in Sycamore, do you remember how you felt? Did you have any imposter syndrome, or were you just thrilled to be there? Or walk us through what it was like not coming from a writing background and walking into a newsroom.
All of above. I have a little man I wrote about study at the confidence of total ignorance, which is kind of what I was. I kind of backed into writing. I went to Rice, played basketball. I got a degree. My first job out of school was at Montgomery Ward, a big retail chain selling baseball bats. I wanted to quit in 10 minutes. I stuck around for 6 months. They made me Santa Claus. I rode a bike around the store in a Santa Claus suit.
I read that story. We published that in the Courier Journal.
Well, okay.
You wrote that for me a couple of years ago.
Yeah, way back. I left there. I went to the Chrysler Corporation up in Illinois and was welding parts for police cars. They were making 1,000 regular cars a day, and I hated that. Anyway, I quit I like to write. I've always liked to write. Nobody ever said I can make a living as a writer, but that's where I felt comfortable because I wasn't very good at explaining myself, but I could write it. So I quit cold turkey, went home and told Janet, I want to be a writer. I sent out letters to different papers, and the local Sycamore, Illinois paper where I grew up needed somebody. The guy just quit. So they hired me, and I had no training. I was writing longhand with a pencil, never learned how to type. And I wrote my first column there. That was it, game over. I just admired guy named Mike Royko in Chicago. He was terrific,
Yeah.
big
Yeah.
city writer. I loved his style. It didn't
Yeah.
work in a small town on the cornfields, but I just felt so comfortable writing. It's where I belonged, and I just stuck with it.
Do you still like to draft by hand instead of pecking it out? Is there a how
Oh
long
no,
do you do
I
that?
still use my two fingers and I peck it out. And
Mhm.
after 40 years of that, you learn pretty well how to do it.
Mhm.
No, it's still one paragraph at a time. Write a paragraph, write a second paragraph, read the first paragraph, read the second,
Yeah.
back and forth. And that's still how I do it. And I've always loved to do it. I get lost in
Mm.
writing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love it.
Hmm. I think I wrote a bunch of quotes down as I was reading the book, and I really love there's two quotes that stand out to me. The first one says serendipity is mandatory in any successful column writing venture. I really like that one. And the next one is nothing will kill a columnist quicker than trying to be profound. And I think that there's some truth to that. I think people will get lost in flowery
Yeah,
language instead of
right.
just trying to write what they see and they feel.
Just go back through and knock off a syllable for every word. Yes,
Right?
excuse me.
Hmm.
Serendipity. My second day in Louisville, I walk in the lobby and Muhammad Ali's in the lobby of the newspaper. My idol, the guy I'd never imagined I'd ever meet in my life, and he's in the lobby. And things like that happen to me all the time. I went up to Butcher Hollow, I wanted to go to Loretta Lynn's home place. And I walk into a store up there. Loretta Lynn's brother owns the store. There's a band playing. We get to talking. I tell him I'm from the paper. I want to see where Loretta Lynn's from. He takes me over to her house. I end up drinking moonshine with Loretta Lynn's brother in Butcher Hollow, Kentucky. Just pure serendipity. I ran into things. I wrote a book called Double Jeopardy about a man that got away with murder. And one of the key figures was an attorney named Scott Cox, whom I never met. I'm going down with the justice, Hall of Justice for the first hearing on it. I park my car. The guy parks next to me, Scott Cox. We walked in together and we became tight for the next 18 months. Just things like that that happens to all journalists, really, but you just live for that. When you do 3 columns a week, you need it.
Yeah.
You know, you just have to bump into stuff. Be aware of this is a column.
Do you think that some of that has been lost in the digital age with everything happening either via Zoom or you interview somebody via email or you talk on the phone? Not as many shoe leather journalists out there, especially commentators going out there to actually be there.
Yeah, I don't see anybody that does. I'm sure they're out there that does what I did. I'd go on I'd get on a bus and talk to people. I'd go to a blue collar restaurant in Louisville. Went in there one time. I sat down. There was a lady in there talking about her chickens. The most entertaining monologue about chickens in the history of chickens. There's a column. It just came because I was sitting in this restaurant. I was wandering around Kentucky as a Kentucky columnist. There's a guy out there plowing with mules. I park my truck. I go talk to him. I want to plow behind mules, buddy. Come on. I end up plowing behind mules. It's just, uh, you just have to go out there and look for it and get some shoe leather. And again,
Yeah.
there must be people doing that, but everything's so reduced now and different, and the time schedules are different. And they just left me alone. I said, look, I'm going to write 3 columns a week. Leave me the hell alone. I'm going to find them. And I did. And
Yeah.
I don't know
Do you think some of the animosity against the
if that
media
luxury
plays to
exists
that?
anywhere anymore.
Did you feel that when you were out there that or were people welcoming to you, or was there animosity towards the media when you were doing it?
No, not at all, because I grew up small town. I could always talk to people. More important, I could listen to people. That's the key. I find somebody and I listened to them and I really cared. I wanted to hear what they had to say. And this animosity of late, this Trump-induced whole right-wing fraud newspaper journalism stuff, fake news, it's just terrible. And they're winning. They seem to have more right-wing media than we have left-wing media, to get into politics real quick. So I never felt any animosity at all because I wasn't out there looking for trouble, looking for stories.
Yeah. I think you and I value those same types of, I'm not to the same extent. I'm not traveling or I'm not hitchhiking across the state looking for stories either. Like,
But
but I do try to find the humanity among us and write about those
uh,
people doing those things. I do feel like in column writing today, a lot of it has fallen, instead of getting out there and getting to know your community and talking about those stories among us, it's a lot of hot takes, and it's a lot
yeah,
of just reactionary vitriol, reacting to the politics, reacting to the news, instead of going out there and finding a narrative that exemplifies the humanity in your town. um, I don't know how we get back to that.
well, yeah, I've been told many times by people, Bob, we love your writing, except when you talk about politics. Stop writing about politics. Well, bullshit. I'm not going to stop writing about politics, but I do connect with people at a certain level most of the time just by doing what I do and by listening to what they have to say. And I put it in the paper.
Yeah.
Well, my favorite, I think of this, I just wandered around my truck, as I said, and I found an old black man that lived in this shack of a house in western Kentucky. When I got out, his name was Claudius Greenwade. I'll never forget him. And we talked about his life there and his family there. And we ended up walking up the hill into the woods trying to find his parents' graves. And they're just stones, even stones placed in the woods. And he couldn't find it. He says, I just didn't know. I didn't know which one was my parents. That kind of thing just so resonated with me and still does. It has to be told.
Yeah. Yeah, some of your columns are really funny though too. Like, I think of the woman who went and collected her birthday oyster dinner, and kept saying that, oh, don't put this in the paper, and then
Yeah,
that's what
yeah.
she put in the paper. Don't put this in the paper. I mean, it was fun. You were able to not only um, write about the hard things, the poignant things, but there were a lot of fun things too. I mean,
Oh, yeah. That was one of the fun ones. It was this restaurant, Mazzoni's in Louisville, very popular restaurant, had a sign, free meal to anybody 80 years old accompanied by a parent. Never imagining that here's this 80-year-old guy who was a 103-year-old mom who come in there. And somebody called me about that one. Once you start doing that kind of stuff, you get phone calls. So I sat there and she repeated, don't put this in the paper. And she knew damn well it was going to go in the paper.
right.
Don't put this in the paper. Don't put this. And that was the last line in the column. And yeah, it's a flow that was kind of fun.
That is. That's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. I'm looking at my questions here. So, how did you choose when you were writing this book? I like the way that you interspersed the columns with how you got there, and you gave us your sense of place before and introduced the columns that you were writing in that time. Over 4,000 columns. There are not 4,000 columns in this book. How did
No.
how did you go through that painstaking process of choosing what to put in there?
Well, I went through a painstaking process of choosing what to put in there. Now, the book is set up. I started writing columns at Sycamore, Illinois, my weekly. Then I went from there to Rockford for 5 years, and then I went to Louisville for 33 years. And so I wrote kind of, I hate to use the word memoir, it's too fancy, but for memoir, autobiography of how I got to those places, and then the columns I wrote there, and then how I got to Rockford and how I wrote there, and they're all stories in themselves. And boy, to go back and read some of the first columns is kind of, hey, what is this guy?
Painful.
Oh, yeah, you see a paragraph that might work down the road somewhere, and there's this
Right.
kind of naivete that, and you can see yourself trying hard to write a really good column, and eventually you get to do it. But I went through all my books. I got two books of collections of my columns. They're out of print, so I can do this.
Yeah.
They're all
I have those books.
there's 300 columns in there, and I went through and I marked them A plus, B minus. Then I went back through again and compared the A's and the B's. I ended up putting about 50 or 60 in the book. I could have put more. But what I really liked about it as a columnist, they still worked. Some of these columns I wrote 40 years ago, and they work today.
Yeah.
It's a
Mhm.
human condition I wrote
Right.
about. Whatever was going on then, is going on personally now.
Yeah.
And I want to write another book. I'm going to write another book. It's Janet and I have been married 63 years, and we've been living here 50 years. When we first got married, we had $500 in a 52 Buick. My next book is 50 years, $500 in a 52 Buick. And I want to go back through and write some of those timeless stories about our marriage and our kids that both of them did. My daughter's got 2 Ivy League degrees. My son shoots for the Washington Post, photographer. But I want to make it more family stuff and then work in some more of the other old columns that I have. Because it's just fun to read them. A lot of them I forgot. 4,000 columns 40 years ago, you forget them. But I really enjoyed the process. So this guy's pretty good. He can write.
He is. There's a couple in here that I love that are a little bit more personal. You talk about you put the column in there about talking to the lavender tree, like and just standing on your property in the morning before you start your day.
Yeah.
Talking to a lavender tree there, and then you also, like, when the Louisville Times closed, your column there is in there, and I think we've all kind of felt that grieving of the loss of newspapers, and it still stands. You articulate it very well, and it still stands.
The Louisville Times, the last day I went in the morning, about 4 or 5 o'clock, deadline was, I don't know, noon maybe, for the last ever Louisville Times. And I just wrote a slice of life column, what was going on, the copy desk coming in, and a cleaning lady working around the desk, and the sadness of that. And just what it felt to literally lose the paper, because Gannett had come in and bought Courier Journal and Times and promised no changes. And 2 weeks later, they're off with the Times. Yeah. But one good thing about the Times is we organized an old-fashioned march. We hired a band. We marched through the newsroom. We weren't going to go out with our heads down. We marched through the newsroom, took the band outside, marched up and down the street in front of the Louisville Times building, and said, take that, whatever. So we got some satisfaction, and we still talk about that when we get together.
Yeah.
Newsrooms, anybody's been in a newsroom, and I really don't know what it's like now when you're working out at home or you don't have that. We'd all put together the paper and go upstairs in the cafeteria and get together around the table and just shoot the shit for half an hour, talking about different things. And then the closeness you get, and you bond. And I'm not sure that exists anymore in newspapers. I don't know. I'm out of it.
I think it's tough because there's a lot more on the shoulders of every journalist right now, where you could focus on the writing before, and now you have to worry about your stats, how many clicks you get, your SEO, how is Google tracking you, and you have to worry about all of these other things. And if you're an independent journalist and not with a newspaper, you have to think about your own photos and how you do all of these things, and how are you going to promote your work on social media, and there's just so many layers to it that it reminds me, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on now and what people can learn from you, from your potential move for the Kansas City Star, and work-life balance was a real important thing to you. What advice do you have for someone who is in this kind of journalism world struggling with that work-life balance? How did you, in that moment, assess what was important versus your career opportunity?
Well, that's a great question. Yeah.
Uh-oh, you
I
froze.
grew up obviously a jock. High school, college. I played basketball when I was in my 50s. Not very well, but we played. But the people at the Louisville Times moved on to Kansas City, 2 of the main people, editors. And they called me over to Kansas City and said, how'd you like to be sports editor here? The head sports columnist, Super Bowl, NCAA, all of it, every bit of that. And the guy that did it ahead of me traveled almost 200 days a year.
Wow.
And I came back saying, boy, this is an opportunity. I can't pull this one. This is going to be great. I can do all this stuff I always wanted to do. I come back and I talked to my wife, and we live on 8 acres farm. I got an old barn. And a buddy of mine came out and brought a 6-pack of beer. We went up to the loft of the barn. opened the back door, and looked at the pasture, and I'm thinking, I don't know if I want to leave this. But the big kicker was both of my kids were involved in many, many things. I wanted to watch them grow up. I didn't want to watch somebody else's kids grow up. So I made a decision right there and then. I'm staying here. I'm going to watch my kids go to games. My daughter did this, and my son did this. And I would love to have done it for 2 years in Kansas City. It would have been terrific. I would have got the opportunity. But I've never really regretted it because people don't realize how much sports writers and people who travel, political writers, and all the time they're gone, what they're missing from their family. And I just decided that was what I wanted. I wanted my family. I've never regretted it. I got this 8-acre place. It's covered with flowers and trees and shrubs, and my wife and I are still here, and the kids are doing well. And I stayed home, and that's why the book was called Out Here, because all my jobs have been in the Midwest, or Kentucky is sort of Midwest.
You're gonna start a fight. Is it Midwest or South? That's a big old fight.
Yeah, they call it Kentuckiana.
Right.
Yeah, Louisville really is not a southern town. I mean, I've been to southern town. It's not. You've been there too. It's got a whole lot of Yankee in it. A lot of other, it's a good place. I mean, it's got some troubles. It's had recent trouble with Breonna Taylor and the police and all that. But really, I'm 8 miles from my job, living on 8 acres of land. And I used to go to work at 4 or 5 in the morning, no problem. And I'd leave at 11, throw my column in the basket, and get the hell out of there. Go find something else. How can you beat that?
Right. One of my favorite columns is The Great Daffodil. And I'm very much feeling that right now because with all the snow that we've had, and I got my seed catalogs coming in the mail, and I'm waiting for the snow to melt, and I'm going to take your lead, and I'm going to sit in a chair outside, and I'm going to wait for the Great Daffodil to arrive.
Yeah, that was fun. And again, I got to go to the other side of it. I got to go like the NCAA finals in '78. Kentucky won that. St. Louis, Indianapolis for the Louisville in '80. '83, I went to New Orleans. So I've been to NCAA finals. I've been to pro football games in Cincinnati. And
you went to
I got a touch of
Czechoslovakia
that.
too, didn't you, on assignment?
Oh yeah, back in Rockford, a lady named Janet Lynn was the world's best ice skating champion. And we went to Bratislava, Czechoslovakia in '73 or '74, and she was supposed to win. And interesting because you write copy, this is on the other side of the Iron Curtain. In fact, I paid a taxi driver. I shouldn't have done this. I gave him $20. I said, drive me along the Iron Curtain, buddy. And he did. And I'm sitting there, around looking out, they're going to shoot us. They know I'm an American. What's going on? And you wrote copy and you turned it in and you never saw it again. It went all through the red censorship or whatever. I had no idea I was going to get to Rockford or not. And finally I called them. I said, it's fine. But it's a whole different feeling to be there behind the Iron Curtain. And Janet Lynn unfortunately fell in one of the programs. And the whole place was in tears about that because she was like 19 and she'd been U.S. champion 14 or 15.
Wow.
So that was tough, but interesting.
Is that the farthest you've traveled for
recently, in the last 4 or 5 years ago, I got to go to South Africa, to Ghana, a freelance story for the paper. So a group of Louisville doctors had gone there year after year and worked with a maternity hospital in Ghana. Forget the name of the town. Another incredible experience because the level of care the women were getting was just kind of frightening, even with the doctors there. Excuse me. And then the building was inadequate, but the doctors were making it better. But the real part of that was we were out in the country. There's these tents, and Native women are walking miles with babies on the strap to their backs to go with the doctors in the tents. And I wrote about that. So that was another experience that you don't always expect to see when you live in a small town.
Yeah, that's wild. The other thing that happened that I was curious about is that, and it's funny because Ernie Pyle had a very similar experience. Is you tried editing and decided that you'd rather write. And I remember Ernie Powell did the same. They promoted him to an editor and he decided to do
Yeah.
that. And I just left the Courier Journal for the same reason. I was like, I don't want to be an editor. I want to write. Do you think that it's a different skill set and a different passion that maybe letting columnists be columnists is a good thing?
Oh yeah, well, some of my best friends for many reasons at the paper or copy editors because I needed them.
Oh,
Uh,
we all need them.
there's one story I set a record. I think it not like I misspelled one word like 12 times. Was on deadline. It was like scissors or something. I don't know. There's too many S's here, C's here. But now they're all good. There's no copy editors at the paper. It's
No,
amazing.
it's awful.
And
It's really hard.
they had the same passion for that I had. Back in Rockford, one of my copy editors, when I first started, the first couple of weeks, named Chad Brooks, and he, I wrote a story and turned it in. He was a World War II bomber pilot, and he never got over it. Apparently, he walked over to my desk, threw it down, and said, "Fix it," and turned around and left.
Oh no.
Well, I fixed it, and lesson learned.
Yeah.
Chad Brooks. Another one of the people that the copy editors are so needed anymore. And, it's a different world, but I so admire them.
Yeah.
All this stuff's coming to deadline. They got 10 minutes. They got to get
Right.
this.
You need a second set of eyes. Actually, I wrote down one of my favorite quotes in the book is something you say about copy editors, and you say you call them that anonymous army that continually sits between us writers and the grammatical embarrassment. And
Yeah.
that is so true. That's a great line, Bob.
Well, another thing about really good journalists, as you know, is we hate to make mistakes. And
Absolutely.
now you get thrown in your face big time. But I would,
Yeah.
I wouldn't pout. I'd be upset for weeks if I made a mistake.
Right.
I should have fixed it. I should have got caught somewhere. And you get accused of doing that deliberately, and of course we didn't. But that stuck with me, and the columns I'd really work at it. Of course, with columns, if you're making stuff up in satire, you can kind of get away with stuff, a little more than you can working on straight facts. But the copy desk saved me so many times. So many times.
So tell me how when you were observing or interviewing someone or just listening to their story, how did you retain it? Did you just take notes, or now everybody records everything and we transcribe it? What was your process because there's a lot of great quotes and a lot of great anecdotes and just stories. What was your process?
I just made them all up.
That's a good call.
Well, it's funny you mention that because I look back and I'd sit at an hour-long meeting and take notes the whole hour with a pencil, writing, taking notes. And there's a great quote. There's a great quote. Hope I can get it right. So that's how I did it. I would just sit there, and then I learned to take shorthand because I do slice of life stuff, and I would just take little notelets, so to speak, little brief, yellow hat, red hat, whatever, funny hat. Guy came in the door, looked like he was drunk. Then I could go back and have all that on one sheet of paper and work from there. And obviously trying to be accurate to the whole thing, setting the scene, but I wouldn't need to take all quotes. I have no idea how. I guess they tape record now. I can't imagine that.
There's even a phone app that will record your phone conversations, and then there's another app that will transcribe them. I always like to transcribe my own interviews. I record them. I do record my interviews, but I like to transcribe them myself a lot of times because you have to you're in a different mindset when you're recording or when you're interviewing somebody, and it helps to listen to it again. But yeah, I couldn't imagine being in the time where I
should be illegal.
relied on your notes.
Have to work on
it.
And again, I just sit and listen.
Yeah.
That's the key. Watch. I teach. One of the fun things I do now is I teach grade school kids about writing. Third, fourth, fifth grade. You got one, and they're fun because they haven't been tampered down much yet. They're still it's good and bad. And when I tell them, write what you see, what you hear, what you think, and what you feel. That's still what I'm doing now. See, hear, think, feel. One kid one day said, "What about what you smell?" I said, "Okay,
That too.
throw that in there too." But see, hear, think, feel. That's writing. It
Yeah.
still is when you're out there trying to describe. I tell the kids, you're a reporter. You're describing the people that aren't there what it's like. It's that simple.
Yeah.
It takes 40, 50 years to get it right.
Yes.
But
Yeah. How did you saw a lot of things. There were times there where you beat an ambulance to
oh
the
yeah,
scene of, and you interviewed somebody who was holding his own intestines in.
yeah.
How do you get through something like that? Where's your wherewithal? Like, I'm not sure I would even remember that I was writing a story at that point.
Well, it's my job.
Right.
It's that simple. I always admired police, and there are many, many, many good police
Yes.
who could deal with that all day and then go home and coach little league games or something. This
Yeah.
guy was funny. In Rockford, Illinois, I was a police reporter for the first year, maybe two. That was a tradition back then. Take the kid, put him in a cop car, let him see real life out there. Let's see what's going on. And I saw a lot of interesting dead people. Uh, this guy was still alive, and he'd been shot in the stomach with a shotgun. He was holding it in. I beat the police there. I had the police monitor, and I beat the cops there. Went inside. I'm interviewing this guy, and he's holding his stomach in, and he's in shock, but he's still talking. I can still see him, the blood running through his hands and down his feet. And then the cops came in and said, "Get the hell out of here!" And I left. That was enough. I had all I needed. But the thing about that story was the guy who did the shooting had terminal cancer. He was never charged because he was going to die anyway. And so the guy, I don't know, talk about a short story of some kind. And the guy, I think he lived, was shot. I don't know, but that was interesting. The funniest thing that happened my first week in Rockford, it really put me in a journalist's mind. It was a mom. I'd never been. Here's a small town kid covering his first robbery. It's a mom and pop grocery, and I would sit outside, and the cops talked to her, and I finally go inside afterwards. This little old lady is behind the counter. She said, "Hi, I'm Bob Hill with the Rockford Morning Star," and she puts her hand up. She said, "Just a minute." And she goes behind her curtain and comes back and put 35 cents in. She thought I was a paper boy. That's it. From then on in, I figured that's I'm a paper boy. That's
That's
all I
right.
do to these people. And that's
That's
what the
funny.
journalists ought to be, is just paper boys, just delivering the news. And that really made an impression on me. I kept the money though. No, I
Oh,
didn't.
there you go. You
I
should.
did
That was
not.
your tip.
I didn't keep it.
The other quote that I wrote down that I really liked from the book is, he said, "Journalists gather experiences like barnacles. A lot of it is gritty stuff. Some can break your heart. Most of it is very repetitive. A lot of it is fun." What I want to know is, you do see a lot of things that are gritty, that break your heart, that are hard to see, and you have to interpret that for the reader. What was your did we talk about self-care a lot these days, and
No.
secondary trauma and things like that? Was there a time where, like, the guy who got shot in the stomach or any of those things, how did you get yourself through seeing some of the horrors?
Well, I can be fairly stoic, and I was only shot out once myself, so everybody else was the one that was.
That's good.
Lady poured gasoline on herself, set herself on fire,
Right.
and the guy named, I don't know, forget this, the lead in the story. I went out, it was 20 below zero on a January night, and a guy had been shot in the head, and he's laying there in the snow. And the lead in my story was Torbert Beard lay dead in the snow at 20 below. And uh, but you just kind of, it's not like soldiers see it every day in war, and they develop this, and cops see it all the time. I never had trouble with that, really. I could get over it. It's just my job. I'm going to do this. I'm going to go home and see my wife and kids. I'm lucky.
Yeah.
So I never really, I don't think.
Did
That's,
it help that you were providing the way I think a lot of journalists, when they talk to someone who's been through a lot or see something horrific, the opportunity to tell their story is cathartic in itself.
yeah.
And I think, I don't know, I for me, I I've never had to work on a police beat, thankfully. I don't think I'm made of that kind of stuff that I could see that.
Well,
But
it's your job.
yeah,
It's your job. You do it.
yeah.
The nearest thing I got into trouble was there was a gunfight between a guy in a building over here and the cops up on the hill over here, and I wanted to get a closer look for some reason. So I got behind a tree, and all of a sudden I could hear the bullets on the other side of the tree. And I figured, I
Oh,
better
wow.
get out of here. And I kind of
Yeah.
backed out of the way. That's the nearest I ever came to
Wow.
trouble. You just, you do it for 8 hours, you go, you cover you have the thing in your car, you go out on site, you see shootings, you see murders, you see this, you see that. And then the hardest thing about that, actually, almost shooting was back in that day, they asked you to get pictures of the victims.
Yeah.
This was an old school journalism, like if a 12-year-old girl was killed by hit by a bus or something, Bob, go out to the house and get a picture of a little kid. That was really hard. That was the hardest thing I did. And only did it 3 or 4 times. And the parents, most of them made it easier on me. They understood why I was there and what I was doing.
Yeah.
But boy, that was the worst of it.
That's got to be hard. Yeah, I couldn't imagine having to do that. That is hard.
Just old school journalism.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There was the book that your Double Jeopardy book. I want to talk about how it landed you on the Geraldo show and that disappointment of that show. What columnists who find their work thrust in the national spotlight can learn from having to deal with that kind of that kind of attention on your work.
There was a man named Mel Ignato, and long story short, he and an accomplice murdered a woman. He raped her, and then they buried her body behind the house where this occurred. It was the accomplice's house. And they had a trial, and he was acquitted because the woman who was there during the murder was such a lousy witness, nobody believed her. So then later on, she fessed up where the body was, and bam, they got him again. He'd been acquitted of murder. He was eventually tried for perjury, for lying to a grand jury, and did spend time. But when I wrote the book, I forget the name of the publisher, one of the big publishers published it. I spent a year and a half on that.
Wasn't HarperCollins?
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah.
I spent, besides writing 3 or 4 columns a week, I spent a year and a half investigating that book.
Wow.
Because the family of the victim trusted me. They put their faith in me to tell the story right. And once that happens, you're screwed. You know, they just, so, okay, with a lot of press. Bob Edwards was from Louisville, the old NPR guy. They did a 2-part series, and an amazing amount of press because of the book, because of the subject matter. He got away with murder. So they want us on Geraldo, and his pitch was, "Oh, we're not going to make this soap opera. It's a really serious thing, and we appreciate that, and we're going to keep it that way." So 2 brothers and I go to New York, fly to New York, nice hotel, on the set of Geraldo. He comes out and starts asking soap opera questions. You know, the worst possible questions you can do with a family dealing with their daughter, sister murdered. And it was just very disappointing. Not surprising in retrospect how it turned out. I didn't feel particularly nervous about it because I'm just sitting there with one of the 3 answering those questions. And it was just, we were one of 3 different soap opera stories in a 1-hour section of Geraldo. And you know, at the time we thought we wanted to get the story out. The book sold well because of the nature of the crime. But we wanted to say, look, you know, justice was done here. Eventually, he did go to jail for perjury, and but it didn't turn out like we wanted.
Yeah. Is there anything you feel like you could have asked different questions, or was it just, you know, he agreed to one thing and then bamboozled you in the end?
Yeah, well, they had I should have mentioned, they had a crime expert there. He asked him as many questions about what is the nature of this man's mind. Well, how could somebody murder a woman and you go to McDonald's and eat something. Well, how does that work? So they delved more deeply into the nature of the crime and the criminal than they did what the family went through. And we didn't see that coming. The brothers were kind of reluctant at first even to do it, and I was too. But, for the good of getting the story out, Ignato, and the best thing about this whole thing was Ignato had tied the victim up to a glass top table and brutalized her. When he got out of jail for serving time for perjury, he fell on top of a glass top table and bled to death. So there's the God.
That'd be a cruel irony. Is that what that is?
Pardon me?
Is that a cruel irony? What is that called?
Yeah, big time irony. And he had it coming.
Hmm.
Everybody hated him. The FBI talked to me. Everybody talked to me, which doesn't happen very often.
No, that doesn't happen very often.
No.
I have one last question for you, and then I'm going to let Jenny come on and let the audience ask you questions.
Okay.
Your most recent book, prior to this, was the story of David Jones and Humana Success.
Right. Yeah.
And you talk about how that you were disappointed that it won awards, and it's a great story, that it didn't do as well as you'd hoped. And I wonder if that's because of, I wonder what your thoughts are, if that has anything to do with the state of American healthcare system. And do you think that maybe his image got tainted just by the state of our systems?
Yeah, I think it's very much, the book came out and I spent 3 years on it. And long story short, again, he was a blue collar guy, went to college on an ROTC scholarship, served 3 years, went to Yale, a brilliant man. Went to Yale, got a degree, got married, had 2 kids. They lived in a Quonset hut at Yale while he was there. He had 3 jobs while he was there. He came home in an old station wagon with 2 kids and a wife and like a job as a lawyer. And he built that into the Humana Corporation. He and a partner bought $1,000 each. And Humana did $90 billion in sales last year. So they just built this mammoth company. The thing about David was he's given back hundreds of millions of dollars to parks and scholarships, all sorts of things. He's giving money back. But yeah, I was disappointed because I thought it was a national story. Blue collar guy, $1,000 investment, $90 billion company. But I do think it ran directly into the headwinds here of the insurance companies now and what they're all dealing with. And Humana's had some legal issues. And, the state, a sorry state really, of the insurance company in a lot of places, in a lot of ways. But much of this has happened after David retired. I just admired the man. We became friends. I spent 3 years with him, interviewed him 15 or 20 times. And he had a knack for looking at you and you're the only person in the room. He's another guy, once he puts his faith in you, you're screwed. You're just screwed. You got to do the best you can for this man. And he knows it. He knew that. And we became friends. And, I still miss him. And I think, but I don't know, Humana is a totally different company now when he was there. But they built it. They had the world's biggest hospital chain, the world's biggest nursing home chain. Then they built Humana, like the 3rd largest, from $1,000 investment.
Wow.
And there was, of course, some troubles along the way. They had this legitimate, when you have millions of customers, you're going to get people very unhappy with reason.
Yeah.
But he and I were straight up.
Yeah. That's great. Well, thank you. Those were all of my questions. Jenny, do we have people in the audience that have questions?
Anybody left?
We do. We have about 5 questions and some comments. So I'm going to start with Bill Timaeus. He has a question and a comment. So I'll just turn these cameras on and let the people ask the question here.
Bill's got a long memory, I bet.
We bringing Bill on? Oh, there he
Yes.
is. Okay, great.
Time's up.
Okay. Okay, Don.
There you are.
One time at the Louisville paper, you wrote a column about Rick Pitino,
Yeah.
and there was nothing in the column but Rick Pitino's name 400 times.
Right.
Tell us
What?
about that. tell us about the decision to do that as a way of making fun of him or making fun of the people who thought he was God.
And that the
Oh,
paper
well,
allowed you to do that is really incredible, because I don't think
well,
that would fly now.
I did other things too. I'll get to that in a minute. It was a different world. They appreciated a little self-criticism. Yeah, I got sick of Rick Pitino. Everybody got sick of Rick Pitino, and they ended up crashing badly and leaving town after having an affair with a woman in a bar somewhere that everybody knew about. But I just wanted to mock him a little bit, just to say, okay, Rick Pitino. I think I might have used different fonts and different typefaces and so forth. But the whole thing was Rick Pitino, Rick Pitino, Rick Pitino, Rick Pitino. And the paper went right along with it. I don't think the only columns I ever had killed, an editor named Greg Johnson, the Saturday Scene magazine. And if I wrote a bad column, he'd tell me, or it just didn't work. Bob, you can do better than this. And he'd kill it and put one from back in the past. But the other one I did like that, Bill, was kind of fun, was when I think after Gannett bought the paper and they started shrinking things. And I wrote a column where I wrote all the way across the top line, and it got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller till the bottom of the column was just one word. So you can see the size of the column was shrinking to mock what was happening to the paper. They let it go. They just, hell, they all liked it, except the people, I don't even, when Gannett came in, I don't want to get too deep into that, but it was just a different world. I wish so badly that people today in any newspaper could have worked for a place like the Courier Journal, or Kansas City was good, other papers. They had 6 different bureaus. They had 5 in Kentucky, 1 in Louisville, 1 in Indiana. They had full-time theater critics for each paper. They had a full-time book editor. They had the greatest photo staff in the country. I was just overwhelmed by the quality of the product. It was one of the best papers in the country. But they're all that way. It's like kind of lamenting the Pony Express at times. It's a different world.
Well,
But
you and I are examples of how you can grow up in Northern Illinois and make a career as somehow in journalism. I was from Woodstock and you're from nearby Sycamore.
that's right. Forgot about that.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Bill, for all you NSNC, but Bill was a leader. He kind of kept us together. The first couple of years was just kind of fun. Then they said, well, let's do something worthwhile with this organization. And they kind of realized, I think Bill was head of it for quite a while in there. And we mixed the fun with the usefulness.
Good times. Thanks, Bob.
They were good times. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Dave Lieber had a question. He wants to know about the batting average of a columnist. Dave, I turned everyone on the screen who has a question or comment. So Dave, you're on if you want to ask.
Yeah, Bob, hi. You taught me so many things, and one of them was if you write one good column out of 4, you're batting 250. And if you write 3 good ones out of 10, you're a 300 hitter and you're a Hall of Famer. I always think about my batting average, and I really love the way you measure that.
Well, thanks, Lee. Boy, it's good to see you again. And I keep wanting to get back to Texas and tell some more lies, but don't give up on us, on me. Yeah, I had once I get into business, I rank my columns 1 to 10, which is quite about the same as Dave's talking about. And I got where I could write, most of them were 7. And 8 or 9, if you really knew something well and you were so right you couldn't stand it, you'd write a 9. There were no 10s. I never wrote a 10 in 40 years. It's just the perfect column. But yeah, you do tend to, if you do it for long enough, you learn to get away with. I was writing at one time, I was writing 4 columns a week, plus the garden columns, writing 5 columns a week. And you just get in a rhythm. And it's working. And sometimes I batted 250, sometimes I struck out. But there's always, when you do 4 a week, there's always the next column. What the hell? This ain't very good, but I got tomorrow to recover with something else. Lee, it's good to see you, man.
Same here, man.
We had some good times, Timaeus and Leibs, and start naming names. People on Stroop and LSQ, and I don't know if they're still around or not. I don't know.
Looks like LSQ's right here with a question.
Who is?
Kathy Elliskew, is that who you're talking about?
That's her daughter.
Oh, my bad.
Hey,
Hi,
Kathy.
Kathy.
We're,
Hey,
we're, we're Facebook friends.
yeah, wait a minute though. How come I can only see my name? Can you see me?
No,
Nope, your
Uh,
camera's not on.
well, it should be, but anyway. Uh, so hi, Bob. Now I met you in '85 when my mom was there. That was
yeah, I remember.
with my sister. That was the first conference I went
Your
to.
mom was such a wonderful person. Go ahead.
She sure was. Yeah, she went upwards in 2006.
Yeah.
But we sure talked about you a lot, she and me and my sister, and I would say you are probably responsible for me being a member of this group since 1985 or
Oh,
thereabouts.
gosh. I'm sorry.
So it's a fundraiser, you know? Anyway, I love you, Bob, and it's
Well,
great to see you.
I love seeing your name. Your mom and really such good people and such fun at those
We had a
conferences.
lot of fun. Yeah, we had more fun than we should have had.
Well, I'm not going there, but we had, some of the funniest, like Dave Barry, the funniest man in human history, spoke at one. And then the one I remember the most is, remember Molly Ivins from Texas, woman writer?
No, we
Yep.
don't.
The conference we held that year was the same night as the O.J. Simpson low-speed chase. The cops were after O.J. So being journalists, we always we put a pool together. Let's put a time out, how long it's gonna last, put up $5 each. And Molly won it. She won like $150. Everybody got in with a $5 how long OJ's gonna chase the cops or vice versa. Stuff like that.
Uh,
We went out one night and found the world's biggest ball of string about 2 a.m.
that's great.
Anyway, I'll
Good
stop.
stuff. Good stuff.
I heard there was a spelling bee also, or a spelling bee with a bunch of professors one time too. Were you there
Oh,
for
yeah.
that?
I forget the spelling bee.
Yeah, the spelling bee.
Yeah, I'm sure I wasn't a participant, but I remember that. Yeah. And there was just a lot of things. Somebody mentioned the pull the gun on me. Oh, Mike did. Mike Leonard.
Yeah.
So I actually had forgotten about that until Mike brought it up.
Hmm.
Must have been a bad column. How much time we got? I'm starting to blab here. I don't know this.
That's okay. We have a
we
couple
have-
more questions.
Yeah, and we have a few more minutes. Jerry Zazima has a question, and then Joseph, and then Michael is on here, and we'll let him go after Jerry and Joseph.
Yeah.
Bob,
Yo.
oh, you lucked out. There's no picture of me.
I was hoping.
Well, and the comment I had is I was a sports writer when I had a young family. I quit because I didn't want to miss anything.
Yeah.
Everyone said I'd give my right arm to write sports. I said, I guess I'll have to call you Lefty. But like you, I never regretted getting out. The following year, which is 1985, I started writing my syndicated humor column. I've chronicled all the family stuff. I'm so glad I didn't miss. So
I understand.
Not incidentally, your book is great.
Well, thank you. Oh,
I'm loving it. I'm on page 98.
wow. Quit moving your lips. They're going quicker.
Also, my wife says hello. She was with me on one of the early ones, which was in it was in West Virginia, and we had drunken karaoke. And
Oh, yeah, right.
she said that Bob Hill's a great guy, very funny. So she says hello.
Drunk or sober. That was the golf course, wasn't it? I think.
And
Oh,
we took a
San Diego.
yeah, no, we took a riverboat cruise in West Virginia.
Yeah. One of those fancy places, we were supposed to wear a necktie to dinner and we didn't know it. So we took out the cloths in the closet you wipe your shoes with, put it around our neck. We tied them, about half a dozen guys tied them and walked in. Nobody said a word.
Well, anyway, listen, no, your book's great. You're great too, and thanks for all you've done over the years for the NSNC and column writing. You're a real newspaper man, which in our profession I think is the ultimate compliment.
That really means a lot. That's as good as it gets. Yeah. It was the best thing I ever heard. I was in a bar one time, and there's a guy sitting next to me. The best comment, and he's sitting next to me, and he looks over at me. He says, "Hill, you can make do where there ain't no do." Then go back to his beer. That's as good as it gets in the column world.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it is. Good stuff, Bob. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Joey.
Thanks, Jerry. And Jerry just celebrated 40 years as a humor columnist, and he has a
Wow.
new book out. So thanks, Jerry, and congratulations on your accomplishment there with 40 years. That's fantastic.
Well,
And-
no one has stopped me.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
keep doing it.
Yeah.
And we have a new member with us, Joseph Peterson, has a question for Bob.
Yeah.
Hey, Bob. Can you hear
Yes,
me?
sir. Yeah, we are.
Great. Yeah, so I'm new to column writing, new to this group, new to the industry in general. So you have me kind of pining for what sounds like an industry I've never experienced and never will experience. But sounds like there's some good days in the rear view. You mentioned Dave Barry. You know, he and E.B. White are kind of some of my idols. I kind of aspire to be a very mediocre version of somewhere in the middle between those two.
Oh,
But one theme I keep seeing, especially with E.B. White, is kind of reminded me of the Daffodils column that was mentioned earlier in this conversation, where I find so many of the great columns, at least that I'm drawn to, or the essays, kind of tend to zoom in on something really kind of small but universal in everyone's experience, you know, everyone's backyard. These little
Exactly.
meditations on nature, things we all wonder, everyday experiences, you know, sort of prosaic observations, and then kind of take a poignant turn or a witty or humorous turn, or maybe somewhere or both. And you know, I keep on noodling on this one column idea that I'm trying to fit into this column that I'm writing for my local newspaper, on, you know, the common robin. And it just, I keep on waffling whether or not it's like, you know, it's too prosaic or too, you know, simple, or something that needs to be a little bit more. And I just want to know, is there sort of an awareness in like a seasoned writer like yourself to take those sort of powers of observation or commentary and sort of focus them on what I call these sort of backyard wonders, or these tiny wonders?
It's mandatory that you do that.
Got it.
Absolutely mandatory. I
So
did,
write the Robin column.
yeah, I've done a bunch like that. I did one in Rockford. It's a little like that, where I went out and was waiting for the great pumpkin to show up. It was like Halloween. I went out in the woods and just sat there by myself waiting for the great pumpkin to show up. And
I love that.
a friend of mine, it gets better. A friend of mine stuck in the woods behind me and started shouting, "Bob Hill, I'm the great pumpkin." We went and got a beer afterwards.
That's awesome.
But no,
That's terrific.
that's mandatory, man. Just go with what you feel. There's just not enough of that. There's so much bullshit, and 4 or 5 people getting together, like sports. I don't need 5 guys before every football game telling me what's going to happen. It's all forgotten as soon as the game starts. I mean, just focus on what you're doing. Make yourself happy, and a lot of other people come along with you. I guarantee you.
Great. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. Keep going.
Thanks for being here, Joseph. Mike Leonard had wanted to chime in here. So Mike.
I have several things I can chime in on right here, but first of all, I just want to honor all of Bob's writing, but then also the fun side of Bob, which attracted me to this group. So 85, I got my first column, met in Columbus, Ohio, and I go there, and before lunch, there's a pay bar outside of lunch. I thought, well, this is different, and then later we go to the it was either that or another time, the Bull Seaman Hall of Fame in Columbus.
That was one of the great trips ever.
Yeah, and we were on the edge of getting thrown out several times because everybody's a smart ass and they didn't appreciate it. But all that leads to my favorite story, which we talked about before we went live, which was the time we went in Phoenix out to find the world's largest ball of barbed wire. So
That's what it was.
it was you, Des Rousseau,
Yep.
me,
Yep.
and the guy from the Cincinnati Post who wrote a column for the Indiana side. Can't remember his name. So
Yep.
at any rate, it's after the hospitality suite ends, and we get one of us, you probably heard about the ball of barbed wire. So we all take off and we go and we get into a neighborhood where we shouldn't be. And you bound out of the car to ask somebody, where is this? And we're in the car and we say, that guy just pulled a gun on Big Bob. And because you bounded over to the car and he showed you his gun. It's like, what are you doing here? Because it was like somebody's gang area and so on, that we were totally clueless. So, it was impactful.
Did you
And
ever see it? Did you ever see the big ball of
we
twine?
actually
Or
found it,
what?
and it was a modest subdivision on somebody's front yard, and it was about 10 feet tall and that sort of thing. So it just kind of illustrates the attitude of fun that we had at the beginning. Was like, we work in a newsroom and all that kind of stuff, and a lot of those people aren't fun. And when we got together, we had a lot of fun. And so I appreciate you and Des
Oh, yeah.
for really
Yeah.
leading us into what still exists.
Are you still in Bloomington?
I'm still here. Yeah.
Well, hell, man, you're only 2 hours away. I'm going to find you.
I'd love that. Or
Or
if
you can find me.
if I get to Louisville, I can find you. Yeah.
Oh, it's going to happen. I'll have to stage the life. Or when I say that anymore, I mean it, because who knows?
If you come to Louisville, you have to invite me. I'm just
Oh,
throwing
yeah,
it there.
that's right. Yeah, all three of us. Four.
Yeah.
Three.
We'll come see the nursery when you've got some things
That's a good idea.
going on.
You can do some weeding.
Yeah. At any rate, though, good to see you. And
Thanks, Mike.
not here, I don't think, is our mutual friend Amanda Beam, who also is kind of in this group of we all know each other.
Thanks,
Well,
Mike and
It was
Bob.
truly good time. I always use the phrase, I'm sorry. I always say journalists have cheerful cynicism, what keeps us going. And you just need both cheerful cynicism. And underneath that, you really care.
Yeah.
You want to make things
Yeah,
right.
you epitomize that, dude. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you both. We have time for one more question, and Susan had a question and a comment. So Susan, we'll turn it over to you, and that'll be our last question tonight.
Thank you, Bob. Oh, I just love learning and listening. I'm about 5 hours north of Detroit in Traverse City, Michigan, and I've written a column for the Traverse City Record Eagle since 2008. And believe it or not, I'm a person that spent most of my life from a stroke using a wheelchair, and my newspaper lets me write about anything related to psychology and health and disability and really anything. And I'm curious which of your columns got the most reaction and why you think that is. Thank you.
Well, with 4,000 of them, it's just hard to pick, but
I know which one. The thank you letter for the guy who waved.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one. Yeah, it was a guy. There's a road in River called River Road. It runs along the river, go figure. And he'd sit there and just wave to people. He was in a wheelchair, I think. He had some kind of disability. And he just sat there and he'd wave, and people just took it for granted. And one day he wasn't there, and I went to see what happened, and he was in the hospital. And I said, look, this guy, I wrote a column saying, hey, our friend is gone. He can't wave right now. And he got hundreds of letters. People wrote to him. So it's always those personal ones that touch the most. When you just get out of the way and write what you really think or feel, and don't try and do it for effect, try and do it because that's how you really feel about something, how you care about something. They're the ones that dance. They're the ones that sing the most. Guys, this has been terrific. I'm just, I don't know, I almost in tears talking to Bill and Mike and other liars in the organization. And it's been fun.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you both, Bonnie and Bob. And Bonnie, do either you or Bob have any closing thoughts? And then we'll just call it a night. And thank you to everybody for being here, and especially to Bonnie and Bob for just hosting this session. I think everyone enjoyed it very much.
I just want to say thanks. It's been a lot of fun to get to know Bob living here in Louisville, and I'm really just grateful for the NSNC that when they said yes, when I reached out and said, hey, can we do this? And we're gonna do it for free, so no, it's not gonna have any money tied to it. And you guys said of course, and so thank you to the NSNC. I'm always forever indebted to the kindness of the organization.
All I gotta say is, oh dear.
Get your book.
No, it's been it ain't the money. It ain't the money. It's you guys. It's the business and the people in it. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Right.
Thanks, Bob. Take care.
You bet,
Thanks,
Bill. See you,
Bob.
man.
Bye.